Good morning. This is LA Prepper here with another vlog. Today we're going to talk about Hurricane Irma. Not just because it's good clickbait, which of course it is, but because it's very relevant to prepping. Um, it's a real world event. So rather than talking about what could happen or what might happen, we can talk about, or I can talk about, and we can think about what actually did happen and how your preps, um, might be impacted by some of the same things that the Floridians, and of course, people in, South Carolina and Alabama and all those regions are going to have to deal with. And one thing I think that could be a little dangerous is to say, well, I don't get hurricanes. And for example, I could say that I live in California. We don't get hurricanes, we get earthquakes. So I could sort of easily say I don't have to worry about floods, which is mostly true. Where I live in Los Angeles, it would have to rain a ludicrous amount for it to flood. I mean, my apartment's, up on a hill from the street and stuff like that, so it'd be even harder, and I'm on the second floor. But LA does have some flooding problems. We actually just had a flash flood, not Los Angeles, but some of the areas up in the mountains. Excuse me, we had like a tropical storm in Mexico kind of come up into the mountains and dump a bunch of rain. And we had, forest fires, of course, recently, some pretty big ones. So when you have forest fires and all the vegetation's eroded, and you get a lot of rain, the earth can slide down. You get debris flows and mudslides and things like that. So I'm not really near a big enough hill to worry about mudslides, but it is kind of regionally an area, and they could certainly knock out power or something like that. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that no matter what natural disasters you might be subject to, prepping isn't so much about what specifically could happen. At least in my opinion, it's more about being ready for the eventuality that this unsustainable path that we've decided to live on as a society, as a world, um, well, like I said, it's not sustainable. So that's kind of my belief. Whether it's fiat currency or political unrest or famine or who knows, maybe just good old infrastructure breaking down. Um, Not having the power as a result of a hurricane versus not having the power as a result of an earthquake, at the end of the day, even though it really depends how much the system is damaged. So let's get into it then before I kind of spend 20 minutes on side topics and introductions. So I'm going to talk about Hurricane Irma and how someone might think about prepping as far as power, food, water, and safety. So, power. Just reading on Drudge Report that something like 6 million people are without power. Not too surprising. But more disturbing than that is how long they think it's going to take to get the power back on. And, some of the professionals are saying that could be a few weeks. I'm sure it varies, but let's just say for the point of argument that it's going to be let's take a few scenarios. Let's say 72 hours, a week, and 2+ weeks. Okay, so the power's out for 72 hours. Let's say you don't have a generator. Most people don't have generators. I don't have a generator. Probably even a lot of preppers don't even have generators. They're expensive. You basically are never going to use it. Um, I guess depending on your point of view in the future, maybe of course you will use it in the future. But unless things get really, really crazy, even though they're super useful to keep the power on, I think um, well, maybe I'll speak a little later about my opinions on whether or not, how important a generator should be in your preps. But let's say you don't have a generator. You can keep the food in your fridge good, maybe a day, some of it, with the door closed. But, after a couple days, it's not going to be worth the risk, at least in my opinion. Food poisoning is awful. If it was just a matter of like, oh, you get a little sick and then you're fine in a couple hours, yeah, I would eat it. But food poisoning will weaken you. If the power is out, hospitals and clinics may not have power, so it might not. You might be able to get some medication or something for it, but getting sick when services are interrupted, it's like a bad time to get sick. So even if it's something as small as just physically sick, maybe the traffic lights are out and you go to the store to get some Pepto Bismol, but the cash registers don't work and you don't have any cash, but the ATMs don't work and they don't take credit cards because the machines are down. So I'm being dramatic, but the point is, don't get sick. Don't do things that are stupid, like eating, a steak just because you bought it and you think it's fine. Eggs and butter and stuff like that, you might be a little better off with, but meats, uh, stuff that you have to reheat. Obviously things in the your frozen stuff will last a little bit longer, but don't risk it. So in 72 hours, you're gonna lose everything in your fridge. You probably won't run out of your canned foods. Even people that don't prep probably have 3 days of canned foods or non-perishable foods. That is. Hopefully, you can cook it. You probably have enough canned foods that are cooked, and beans and things like that. But even if you just had pasta, you would still need to cook it. If you have the gas, obviously you can use your gas stove, but not the range. Most ranges are going to be an electric ignition, so even if the pilot light for the range is on, you're not going to be able to use the oven unless you could hand light it, which I don't think is really a great idea, if even possible. I don't think they operate like that, but you can hand light your stove, the stove burners. Um, so you're basically going to be fine. If the power's off for a week, you're going to lose everything in your fridge. Your cell phones and laptop, well, your laptop might be fine if you turn it completely off, but your cell phone's going to be dead. You won't have any internet. Depending on whether or not the towers are up, you may or may not have cell service. Um, you may or may not have a week worth of food. Hopefully, you do. The stores, if the power is out kind of regionally, um, you may or may not be able to buy stuff at the store. So, at the end of that week, and probably in the middle of that week, you're going to start to get nervous. You're going to really hope the power comes back on. You're going to be thinking about buying a generator. You're going to be thinking maybe about being a little more careful about being better with your preps or something. But it's going to have, I think, a long-term effect if the power goes out for a week and you find yourself unprepared. If the power's out for 2 or more weeks, depending on, and I talk about hope in some previous videos, depending on what the likelihood of it coming back on is, if it's getting turned on and it's getting turned on and you just happen to be the last neighborhood, that's, one thing. Maybe you have to drive 20 minutes out of town to go to a store that has power, charge your phone, whatever. But if they said it was going to be on in 3 days, and then it was a week, and then it was 2 weeks, you're, you're probably getting through most of your food. And I should have kind of talked about all this stuff at once, I guess. But even, I'll take myself as someone who quote unquote claims to be a prepper, and I'm not a very prepared prepper. Try to say that 3 times fast, but I'm going to be honest. I'm not. I'm not trying to claim that I'm a very prepared person. I'm not trying to claim that I have thousands of rounds of ammo or that I can, start a fire in 20 different ways or that I can live in the woods with nothing but a knife in my backpack for a week. Um, I would get hungry in the woods. I don't know enough edible plants. I don't have solid enough hunting or trapping skills. I might be able to get away with it. Hunting laws and licenses and stuff aside, Could I survive in the woods, with only a backpack? Man, that would be a good video. Shit. That would be a really good video. I'm getting crazy ideas here. But suffice it to say, um, if the power was out for 2 weeks and I had to, let's say, stay in my apartment, I'd probably right now, and let's kind of transition into food. I have right now probably, if I was not very active, probably 3 weeks of food. Maybe four. I don't know about four. Maybe three. I got a lot of canned stuff and a few bags of rice and some cans of tuna and stuff like that. Now, I'm talking like 1,500 calorie a day. You know, maybe I'm losing a couple pounds a week diet, because you don't necessarily need to be worried about trying to keep every ounce of fat on you if you're trying to conserve food. So somewhere between 1,500 to 1,750, very low energy. Probably have about 3 weeks of food. If I had to be really active and really do stuff, and I was not trying to lose weight, or I was trying to keep my weight, uh, about 2 weeks of food right now. I'd love to get that up to 4 weeks. I could probably spend $20 at Walmart and get that up to 4 weeks, and that's not a bad idea. Maybe I'll do a Walmart run and do how much $20 gets you at Walmart. But the point is, when people talk about make sure you have a 30-day supply of food, or a few months supply of food, make sure you have water for a month, it can seem sort of like unnecessary. Like, why would I need more than a couple weeks worth of food? And I think Irma is a really great example of, when power goes out, you lose everything in your fridge. Let's say you had a freezer full of frozen meat. That's all eventually going to go. I don't know how, a freezer full of frozen meat might last a week, or at least the stuff on top might thaw a little bit, but you'll be able to keep a lot of it. But the point is, eventually, even if you have a generator, even if you have 50 gallons of gas, you might burn 5 gallons a day keeping the whole house on. Maybe if you just run the freezer, you'll do better. But let's say you burn, I don't know, 2.5 gallons a day, and you got 100 gallons of gas, which is a lot of gas to be storing, because keep in mind, gas doesn't store for shit. Even if you get that stabilizer, maybe you get 6 months out of it. So at the end of 6 months, you're always, dicking with, excuse me, you're always dicking with cycling through your gas. I mean, that's 25-gallon containers that you have to rotate. And a 5-gallon container is like $20. So that's $400 prepping just on gasoline. And I think if you had $1,000 to spend on preps, I wouldn't tell anyone to go out and spend $400 on gasoline containers. You can probably get it by the barrel. You can probably buy a barrel to put your gas in for cheaper than $400. I have to know how much it costs now. But the point is, if the power's out for long enough, $1,000 plastic drum, $70. 55-gallon drum, $90. Okay, that's not too bad actually. Power's out long enough, you're gonna lose all your refrigerated food. You're gonna run out of gas if you decide to run your generator until you run out of gas, which I wouldn't. But that's where the canned foods, dry foods, stored, things that are non-perishable. That's why it's important to think about this stuff, because you aren't always going to have power. Granted, most people are going to have power most of the time until things get really, really crazy, like a hurricane or an earthquake or something else. EMP, whatever your imagination can come up with. But if you have 3 months of dry food, and you have water to make that, and you have fuel to heat it up, or if it's cold or whatever, then you can put that concern aside. You're going to have other things to worry about, whether it's helping your neighbors, health, income. Are you going to be able to keep working? Do you have a mortgage payment? it might be Hurricane Irma, but the bank still wants its, mortgage. I don't know if you could ask the bank to, give you some forgiveness or something if there's a hurricane, but bottom line, just because you're out of power for 2 weeks doesn't mean life stops, doesn't mean your bills go away, doesn't mean you still have responsibilities. So, in that sense, you really want to make sure that your food, your water, safety, and I'll talk about that, that all your needs are met at least for a certain amount of time on your own so that you can focus on other things in life, whether it's helping clear the street, helping volunteer, checking on your neighbors to make sure that, maybe your neighbor had an oxygen machine and it needed power and you have a generator and they don't. And, you have to make a decision. Do I want to keep my refrigerator going or do I want to keep my neighbor's oxygen machine going? And if you're worried about where you're going to get food and you're nervous and you're off collecting firewood because you don't have propane, you're not going to have as much time, to be helpful in the community. And granted, a lot of people, when they prep, they think about, how can I do the most for me? But unless you're on this planet to just take care of yourself and only yourself forever, I think part of why people prep and part of why it is important to be prepared is because the more secure you are, the more you can contribute to your community. Um, and I think that's important. It's, Houston showed us, and I don't want to say Houston showed us, that people are willing to work together and that we love each other and things like that, because it's always been true. No matter how much hatred and racism is on the news and things like that, people have always been willing to work together. Houston is a great example of it, and I love Houston to death. I used to live in Houston actually, and I loved it. You know, Texas isn't for everyone, but they're all right. They have some. There are some, holdouts as far as racism and things like that, but the South has a lot of holdouts, and the South isn't the only one that suffers from racism. Racism is everywhere in this country, and it comes from all parties, minorities, majorities. If I could, white people are barely a majority anymore. It's not really important, but um, racism comes from everywhere. So it's not, you know, getting off track here, but Texas really showed us, and I'm sure Florida will show us that life is a lot more than um, about how much you can do for yourself. Like the guy in Walmart, that gave the generator that he was holding a generator he was going to purchase, and he heard about this other lady who was in line to get one behind him or nearby him, and she couldn't get one, and he said, "Look, take this. I wanted it. I could have used it, but I don't need it. You sound like you need it." And um, that's the way we really have to be. Is helping people that need things. And after it's going to take a large if things go crazy. Let me talk about safety actually before I get do a quick time check. 18 minutes. Wow, super long video. um I'm actually going to put safety into the next video because I don't want this one to go on too long. But in conclusion, Hurricane Irma has been and is presently and of course Hurricane Harvey are really, really good examples of the amount of devastation that can come, how difficult it can be to leave an area when everyone is trying to evacuate, how important it is to be ready to go, as well as how important it is to be ready to bug in or to stay in place, to be thinking about what you're going to do without power for an extended period of time, not just for a few days. Do you have enough food, not just for a couple days, but for a few weeks, preferably up to a month? Do you have water? All your food takes water. Your laundry is going to take water. Cleaning yourself is going to take water. Flushing the toilet is going to take water. At a minimum, a gallon a day is just, drinking water and not really doing dishes, barely cooking. 2 gallons a day per person would be somewhat livable, but still not remotely close to what you use. So be prepared. Use current examples of natural disasters as motivation to go to Walmart to spend a little more money on some preps. Get some water, get a little bit of food, just $10, $20 a week, whatever you can do. It will make a big difference when the time comes. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.